Welcome to the Principles of Performance podcast, where we discuss how to optimize your health, fitness, and performance. Drawing on decades of experience of working as coaches, consultants, and trainers to top performers, athletes, and teens from professional sports to top universities to the U.S. military, Eric DeGatti and Mike Perry discuss topics and strategies of how to perform at your highest level and be your very best. Join us and our friends and colleagues who are leaders in the fitness and performance industry as we investigate and challenge the most popular training, nutrition, lifestyle, and recovery protocols. And away we go. Here we are with the Principles Performance Podcast, episode number 24. I am your host, Eric DeGatti, and I am flying solo this week. My partner, Mike Perry, is away with the family since we're recording this during the holidays. So I'll do my best to keep up my share. Today, we have a great guest who's also a great friend of mine. And there's some cool stories that we'll share about that. And we're going to be talking about bodybuilding, not necessarily just the training, but also the sport of bodybuilding. We have a legend of the sport here, my friend Vinny Galanti, he's an IFBB pro bodybuilder whose accomplishments include winning titles. And get ready for this: the Mr. New Jersey, Junior USA, Junior National USA, and the Masters Nationals, Pittsburgh, Baltimore, Tampa, Daytona, and Hurricane Pro championships. And so over basically the last 30 years, he's been a leader and an ambassador for the sport of bodybuilding, and he's appeared in just about every single muscle magazine you could think of. And he's been a sponsored athlete with Universal Nutrition, so you've probably seen him in those ads. He's a personal trainer here in New Jersey and coaches and trains bodybuilders for the contest preparation, as well as still actively competing himself and getting ready for the Masters Olympia right now. It's going to be in Romania this August. My good friend, Vinny Galanti, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Eric, for having me. My pleasure.
Awesome. So the quick intro that we'll give is the funny story that I tell is this is going back. I'm going to say it's probably, we're trying to figure this out the other day. It was probably like 1996, I'm guessing. And my brother and I were two geeked out kind of bodybuilders, and we go to join a new gym that's opening, and they say, okay, it's a pre-sale, but we can give you a tour. And we're getting a tour from this guy. And again, we're total bodybuilding geeks, and we're following around, and we're looking at each other, whispering, going, wait, that's Vinny Galanti. I think that's Vinny Galanti. Holy shit, that's Vinny Galanti. And we're like, and he turn around and be like, questions, guys? I'm like, no, we're good. We're like, holy shit, we're working with Vinny Galanti. So we were so excited that we ended up becoming friends. And he worked at the gym, Powerhouse Gym. This is back in Fairfield, New Jersey, and actually trained us both for our first bodybuilding shows in our illustrious bodybuilding career, going back about 25 years ago. And what's very cool is it came full circle to where Vinny actually got my son ready for his first bodybuilding show, where he kicked ass and did great. And so it's been a very cool ride to be friends with you, Vince. So tell us a little bit about your kind of journey, in that you've had a very long and successful bodybuilding career. So how did it all get started for you? And did you ever think you would be able to do everything that you've been able to do in this sport?
No, absolutely not. I'm blessed. I'm blessed and humbled by what I've accomplished, and where I'm at today, literally about 40 years later. So, I grew up in Jersey City, and I had a weight set. My dad got me a weight set. Like, I had to be like, I think 13, 14 years old. And it was that old school metal weight set with the little red clamp at the end with the little metal twisty thing. And one day it fell on my face, and my father got it out of the house, and he replaced it with a Solo Flex. And it was like, one of those machines with the bands, and, it was tension. So while all this was going on, I come to find out that Billy Schultz, his grandfather, lived next door to me. And Billy owned Billy's bodybuilding gym in Bayonne. And at the time, 1983, things were different. You had to be 18 years old to join a gym. You couldn't be 16, 17. I went there. I lied, told him I was 18, and I signed up. And the second I walked into the gym, smelled the weights, smelled the rubber floor, I was hooked. That was it. That this is what I wanted in my life. And you know, my attention span was short at the time. I probably had ADHD or something. I'm, you know, just flabbergasted by what the guys were doing in there, and just that's all I wanted to do. Is all I could think of. So my career started out just working out and not thinking about competing. Didn't even know what that meant until a few months later, when guys were from the gym were getting ready for a gym show called the Mr. Hudson County, and they took me under their wing, taught me how to eat, taught me how to train, but I really didn't know what I was doing. I think my diet really consisted of cottage cheese and fish fillet sandwiches from McDonald's. Just it was fish. So I thought, hey, bodybuilders eat fish. So I did that and took dead last in the contest. The bug bit me, and here we are today. And a few titles later.
So you're saying fillet of fish is not what we should be eating?
Not what should be. No.
Okay.
Cheat meal maybe, but
got it. If you're going to make that your cheat meal, you seriously need help.
yeah.
But so in that time, the sport has changed quite a bit. You know, I got into it later than you did, but I've seen quite a bit change from back then, and then going back and even seeing when my son competed last year. So how do you kind of feel about where bodybuilding's at right now?
I probably wouldn't compete today. I'm not a fan. Well, I shouldn't say that. It's it's changed. So you got to adapt, right? You got to go with the flow. It's a different world with social media. You know, I think even when you came aboard in the 90s, we only had, you had me to talk to and maybe one or other two guys in the gym. And today, a lot of people are just confused about the information. You have people who don't know how to train, teaching people who don't know how to train on social media. And what happens is it causes a lot of confusion, and people do exercises completely wrong. They get hurt. And Eric, you've seen it over the years. There's people who are just genetically gifted and can do an exercise completely wrong and walk on stage and look amazing. That's a genetic freak, and that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is the sport itself has changed, where guys are just doing things that just shouldn't be done. And through training, through drugs, through diet manipulation and severe, what they call now peak week. And, I lose clients when I tell them that I don't believe in a peak week, because they're like, but you have to do a peak week. And I try to explain to them that if you're in condition at 10 days out, 7 days out, we ride it in. And they don't understand that. They think it's a rite of passage to do a peak week and to deplete and cut their water out and do all these crazy things that everyone does. And they don't understand the concept of putting in the work, putting in the effort prior. A lot of guys today I don't think train that hard and don't diet that hard. Like they're we used to. So
no, we're gonna come back to that, but there's also been some changes in terms of there's new categories that I still haven't quite wrapped my head around what they mean, weight classes and rules. So what impact do you think these changes have had on the sport, and what do you kind of like and dislike about some of these things?
So I've always had I've always been how can I put it? I've always known that this is a business, and within the business, it's got to adapt and change so it could grow, right? So we used to have bodybuilding and women's bodybuilding. I think we used to have just women's fitness, and then there was women's bodybuilding, then turned into women's physique, and then bikini came on board, and now in the men's division we have men's classic, which is kind of a more streamlined physique. And then within the categories, there's subcategories where you have what Lewis competed in, your son he was able to step on stage in a true novice. because you have a novice division, but there could be guys who compete in a novice division. So a novice competitor means you've never won an overall in a novice division class. You won your class, but you have not won the overall. And a true novice means you've never stepped on stage before. So you're going against competitors who are in the same boat as you. None of them have experience. So that levels the playing field, which is great. In the true novice, you can win your class, but you can always keep going back to novice because if you haven't won an overall. And then in bodybuilding, you have your weight classes, and in classic, you have your weight classes. But classic goes from with height and weight, not just weight class. It has to be a certain height to fit that weight class. And that's why the physiques are a little more streamlined. And there's a few poses in classic that are not allowed, as far as, like, say, the front lat spread, the rear lat spread. I think or the back double bicep. I can't remember which one it was. And most muscular is not asked for. And then they ask for a classic pose of your favorite choice, but not a most muscular. So it's kind of confusing.
Yeah, and even the fact that you go, and some you wear traditional bodybuilding trunks, sometimes you wear almost bodybuilding trunks that are kind of like, like underwear, and then you wear bathing suits for another, another one
physique, yeah.
in the men's physique. So it's definitely confusing for, an old guy like me coming back to see it 25 years later.
Yeah, there's something for everybody, and that's the great thing about the sport today. But none of those categories would even pique my interest, except just bodybuilding. I'm a bodybuilder, from the heart. So I feel like if you're not going to, how can you go into the gym and not train your legs? How can you go into the gym and not try to be the best you can be? And a lot of guys today don't understand what classic is really about. The bottom line, what classic is, it's all bodybuilding. So eventually you're going to outgrow the class you're in and have to move up because you're growing. You're a bodybuilder. The purpose of eating the amount of food we eat and training is to grow and to expand on the dimensions of our physique.
Well, I mean, that's what originally drew me to it, was not so much that, hey, I can't wait to get on stage in my underwear in front of, my family and friends and a couple hundred other strangers. It was like, if I'm going to invest time in the gym, like, I want to invest time in the gym. I want to do everything I can there and train as hard as I possibly can. And that really leads to one of two things, which is either powerlifting or bodybuilding at that point. And so if we go back, those two worlds were kind of together. Like if we go back in some of the history of it, like back in the Arnold days, you actually had to do a powerlifting meet before you went on stage, right? And so
yes,
those guys were significantly stronger. Franco Colombo and is considered one of the strongest pound for pound people in history, right? So because of that, do you see that that's changed the emphasis where bodybuilders don't have to train that hard or be that strong anymore?
Well, I think there's two ways to look at it. There's some guys who train too heavy when they don't incorporate a lot of the exercises that need to enhance their detail in their muscle. And then there's guys who see, all right, you and I, we didn't have a choice. We had bodybuilding. That was it. And if we were super strong, we probably would have gravitated towards powerlifting, but we didn't. So we didn't have a choice, and guys today have a choice. So with saying that, I think like a lot of people are doing it for the wrong reasons today. You did it because you truly love the sport and you were enamored by what you saw in the magazines. Today, people want likes and followers, and they're not really doing it for the true passion of bodybuilding. They're jumping on board. They're jumping on, what's that term? Jump on a bandwagon, so to speak. So guys are, I mean, look at back. We always talk about that one workout we had in Jersey City where we did legs for I don't know how many hours, and we were like, killing ourselves. Was it productive? Probably not.
Absolutely not. But
yeah,
in terms of physically productive, absolutely not.
But in terms of tapping into how to train hard and just grit, it was productive, right? So you wouldn't see that today. Guys wouldn't even attempt to do something ludicrous like that. It was like that day was like a workout from hell. And we probably like lost weight, lost muscle from doing that. But the mindset was to, you know, push ourselves to the brink. And that's what we did that day. And we learned, don't do that again. We had to do that to know not to do that again. And we always laugh about it. We talk about it. You don't see people pushing each other. The other thing that's lost today is the art. I call it the art of spotting. Guys don't know. I'm very nervous when I think of I want to do a weight that I haven't done in a while. And I look around the gym and I'm like, yeah, I think I'm going to stick to some hammer strength machines today, because I don't know if the jacked dude in the corner even knows how to give me a spot. And that's not an insult to him. It's just the sport has changed so much. They're learning from social media in a way where what you and I have learned, we learned from guys in the past, guys in the gym that trained hard, and you know, and we've had our fun where we teased people in the gym and made fun of people, but it was also at the same time we had respect, because we knew what they brought to the table as far as hardcore training, grit, and just determination of getting to a goal. I mean, we have a friend that you and I always tease. I don't want to say his name on this, but you know, he was one of the guys that, you know, pushed the envelope to open the door for us to what not to do. And in this sport, it's like a little bit, you gotta have a lot of common sense to move forward. It's not just genetics. It all boils down to having the determination to withstand that diet, withstand that kind of training, and try to not get hurt, really, and not to do too much weight, and not to do too much of just bizarre things in the gym. I see bizarre things in the gym all the time now. I'm like, I just scratch my head. I'm like, what are they doing?
Yeah. And so that's where I always joke. And I'm sure you have clients that come up to you and say, well, I don't want to get too big. And it's like, I try to explain it, like, I've spent 30 years trying to get too big. Like, I wish it happened by accident. You know, like, I trained really, really, really hard to try to get too big, and it didn't happen by accident. And so with that, so you actually did do a quick stint in doing in a couple powerlifting meets and did pretty well. How do you feel that kind of impacted your bodybuilding, and did it, you know, because people think sometimes that they're polar opposites, but they may or may not be. Kind of how did that fit in with your bodybuilding? How did it impact your physique and your training?
So when I went into powerlifting, all right, so I was with Universal Nutrition / Animal for 18 years. And I met all of the powerlifters that came through the cage at the Arnold Expo. And one of them was Andre Skiba, who owns Skiba's gym down in Edison, New Jersey. And Eric Schwartz, who trains down there, is a good friend of mine. And I went to them and I said, I think my bodybuilding days are behind me now, and I want to just really do something competitive. So I told Andre, I will forget everything I've ever learned about bodybuilding, what I learned with weightlifting, and within that, in the scope of training for a bodybuilding contest, and you teach me. And so it brought me kind of back to like 1985, where it was camaraderie. It was just working out and training. And then it opened my eyes in a way, something that I've never done. I never really had to put much emphasis on how to train too much. It came natural to me. I adapted pretty quickly. I learned easily. I learned fast. But with the powerlifting, it was a whole new world, from breathing techniques to training with chains, training with bands, training speed work and power work. I never applied that much effort into thinking of training before. Like, I never thought of a heavy day, a light day. I just trained. And so it kind of brought me back to my roots a little bit, just because of the camaraderie, and the guys welcomed me with open arms. And then when I was done with that, I thought about doing something else. I didn't know what I was going to do. I actually, believe it or not, I probably never even told you this, but I actually looked into cycling, buying a bike and doing something because I wanted to still be active. And when I started to like really look into it, that's when I had my first major injury with tearing my right shoulder, and which resulted in 9 anchors to repair my right shoulder before my entire rotator cuff off.
Well, we're going to
And
come back to the injuries in a minute and talk about that, but go ahead. I want to hear about your cycling career, the almost Lance Armstrong.
yeah, but then I thought, so I was saying like how much smaller I had to be and lose all the size to be a cyclist. I'm like, I don't know if I want to do this. I like being the size I am.
All right. So I have a couple different directions I want to go now, kind of shifting gears into training. So what, I talk to trainers and teach people in the training world all the time, and they refer to, oh, that's bodybuilding training, or they'll say, oh, you don't want to, when I work with training with athletes, they'll say, oh, you don't want to train like a bodybuilder. And they throw it out there, but they don't really understand what that means. There's a big difference between training as a bodybuilder in the pure sense of the word, like I'm going to go on stage in my underwear and be judged, versus I'm going to train just because I want to look good at the beach. I want to look nice in the mirror. Like that's kind of not the same thing, right?
No,
So if you have a client come to you and says, well, I just want to look good in my jeans or at the beach, that's not training for bodybuilding, right? So just, it's maybe
correct.
semantics, but kind of explain the difference in the two.
So when I get a competitor that comes to me, and what I do is first we do progress pictures, and if they had competed in the past, I look at their last competition pictures of all their mandatory poses. And my mindset is we're not going to go into the gym to get bigger. We're going into the gym to get better. If you're doing a front lat spread and your front lat spread, if your back in general is a big, thick, wide back, but your front lat spread lacks in width, then we need to focus on attacking the lats from the front first. If your triceps are weak and your biceps overpower your triceps, then we need to hit triceps before we hit biceps. So I try to put a plan together that will execute exercise. It'll focus on exercises that will focus on executing an exercise that I'm having a brain fart here. What I'm trying to say is we go in to get better. We go in to make the muscle appear bigger. But if we just go in and do the same exact stuff that the guy has been doing leading up to, then he's just going to be a bigger version with weak body parts. So we want to be a better version the next time we step on stage. And as you know this, Eric, you can't change the shape of a muscle. We can't change. If you and I train the same exact way for a year, your bicep is going to look one way and mine's going to look another way. We can't change that. We can't change the length of it. We can't do any of that stuff. All we could do is make it bigger, but at the same time, we can end up with something that's pretty spectacular because we're training hard and making sure it's balanced in respect to the rest of the body. So it's a balancing act to look great on stage, and it's not a balancing act to look great on the beach, because on the beach your hands are down to your sides, and a little bit of chest and shoulder training and some back training, and that's all you need. Where it's a simple process, but bodybuilding is more complicated.
Yeah, because you're truly being judged, and as being someone who's a meathead who watched Pumping Iron, and to the point where I know every line of every minute of it. Arnold talks about you're basically molding clay to look
Yep.
a very, very specific way, and so that is not easy when you're talking about human physiology.
No. And the whole term like meathead, like I used to like cringe when somebody would call me a meathead, and I'm like, but I'm not. I love what I do, and I go into it with the thought of it as an art, and that's how I apply my training. It's like an art to me.
And then that art continues all the way to the stage. And anybody who's ever seen, Vinny pose knows that there's an absolute art to it. And you could have a great physique and completely get crushed in a show if you don't know how to show it. Or there's guys who have great physiques, who don't have as great physiques, who can really, really display it well. And there's an
Yeah.
absolute art form to that as well.
Yeah. This past October 1st, when I competed in the Daytona Pro, really nice gentleman. I can't remember his name right now. He's from England. I was 195 pounds next to him. He was 260. And I know how to present my physique. And when I stood next to him, I was able to stand next to him looking as big as him. So if you don't go into a contest knowing how to change your game plan, because you could pose, you should be able to pose, you should know how to pose what enhances your physique. But then at the same time, if you're going against somebody like me, for instance, like I'm going against somebody who's 260, I was able to expand my rib cage a little bit more under the side chest, not come down like how Frank Zane would do it. That's how I do it. But I did it more like an Arnold kind of pose. And I was stood side by side with this guy. And when I looked at the pictures, you kind of like don't know he's 260 and I'm 195. So it's an illusion. It's an art. It's kind of like a science a little bit. It's just putting things into like you're going into battle, and you got what arsenal are you going to use? You know, that's the way I look at it.
Very cool. So let's kind of shift back to the training, and a conversation you and I had. We're at dinner. We were talking about some different things you were doing with your training, and you're asking me, I'm starting some of these exercises in different positions, and I'm doing these different tempos. And what do you think of it? And I said it's actually amazing that's not only very cool and very efficient from a physiological perspective for what you want to do, but it's actually, ironically, the absolute opposite of what I'll do when I'm training an athlete. So kind of go through kind of what we were talking about, some of the things you've done that you found some really good results with, and then we'll talk about how that would apply depending on different goals, how you might do just that or do the opposite of that.
Well, so first I want to touch on the fact that, like, yeah, so I've been doing this since it's going on 40 years. And I always had the mindset of, if you think you know it all, then you stop learning. And so I've always tried to put myself in a position of having people who were smarter than me around me. And so that's why, I would always pick your brain. I'm like, Eric's on a different level of different like training. And I had no issues of asking you or anyone else that I thought knew more than me, and in a humbling way, because I just wanted to get better. I didn't look at it as you started after me. I looked at it as you were smarter than me in the category that I want to learn from. So that's why I would ask you, right? So then we would talk, and I knew that if I threw a question at you where it didn't make sense, you would tell me the truth. Because in the gym, guys would be like, that just sounds stupid. But I had this theory, and the way I approached it was, all right, I'm 55 years old. I don't get a pump like I used to when I was 25 years old. 25 years old, if I was stupid enough one day to pick up a 60-pound dumbbell to start with curls, I wasn't going to get hurt, and I also could get a little pump from it. Today, that ain't happening. I'm not even attempting to look at the 30s, let alone look at the 60s, right? So how do I approach this? How do I get from A, B to C in a workout where I'm feeling great, I end great, and I don't get hurt? So I started to play around with range of motion. And I started, like, for example, with, say, the tricep extension. I would start out with my hands extended first, then come back and start the motion, instead of being in this position, pushing, because it would be all elbows. I would only feel it in my elbows. Now, 25 years ago, I didn't need to do that. So I had to start rethinking about, how do I train? And a lot of the times that my training would be with, I had to have a good spotter, which was difficult to find. And trying to get in positions where the muscle's already in an activated position, where I can, instead of getting from here to push, which is, I have 14 screws around my shoulders, so I have to get past that and get past my elbows. So how do I engage my chest? It's in this position, already a pressed position, and then come down with control. And I can get full range of motion, and I can get a pump in my chest. Same thing with back, where when I would do a pull down, I would, back in the day, I would just start pulling the bar down. Now I have to take my biceps out of the workout. I have to take my shoulders out of the workout and focus on thinking like, okay, your hands are a hook, your arm is a lever, and you have to pull with your back. You can't see your back, you got to feel your back. And I probably improved a large percentage in the last since I'm about between 49 and 55, a greater deal than I've ever have, just by training probably smarter than ever and putting emphasis on feeling the muscle, throwing the ego out the door, leaving the ego out the door, and focusing on what I can do and not what I can't do. So I'm in the business of building muscle, and I'm in the business of how do I get my hamstrings to hang? What exercises will do that? Okay. Textbook or in the gym says you got to squat ass to grass, right? That's like that's the big thing, right? So I would do that over how many years I've been doing that. And then I would just think to myself, well, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense to me. I'm squatting 3/4 of the way down and I get a huge pump in my quads. I squat all the way down like everybody in the gym is doing, and I get nothing but a bad back and my hips are killing me. So I started to change the way I squatted. I started to add Bulgarian split squats, and my hamstrings hang like they've never hung before. My quads have gotten bigger. My back's gotten wide. Everything is different on me because I've had an open mind to go outside of bodybuilding training into other trainers' mindsets of training. And I think that's the biggest thing.
Hey, everybody, a quick break in the action here. Hope you're enjoying the show and we appreciate you listening. We're working hard to bring you the highest quality content and best guests every single week. So if you could do us a big favor and go and like and subscribe to the show on whatever platform you get your podcasts on, it would be greatly appreciated. Be sure to listen at the end of the show also to find out where you can find out more information about our courses, as well as a special discount code for all our listeners. Thanks again, and let's get back to the show. And so with that, it's really kind of understanding that it's not about just the exercise, it's how you perform that exercise. So we may take the same exercise, and if I'm training, if you and I are training together because you want to train for bodybuilding, I'm going to coach that 100% different than I will if I'm trying to maybe train an athlete, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to load tissue, right? The more stress you put on the tissue, the more response you're going to get. And that's really what you're looking for. Whereas, and it's almost, you're looking for inefficiency, right? You don't want to be able to do it with less effort. You want to be able to get more effort. Like you said, if you get a better pump now with a 30 than you do with a 60. Now, if I'm an athlete, I want the absolute opposite effect. I want to be able to do the least amount of effort to move that 60, to make that 60 feel light. So right. from an approach standpoint, it's different. From a position standpoint, like you talked about, you're starting in a loaded position, so you just stay loaded the whole set. Whereas for an athlete, I need to create force from a dead stop. Sometimes that's what acceleration is, or I need to be able to put on the brakes. I need to get into extreme positions. And so with that, there's a lot more wear and tear in your joints. And so if you're doing the volume of training that a bodybuilder does, that's going to eventually catch up to you. And so that, I think that's been a big piece of kind of your longevity with that. Now that kind of leads me into, you mentioned, obviously you've had some injuries, but you've also, need to adjust to those things. So tell me kind of what that has done to your training.
Well, learning powerlifting training actually got me through my shoulder injuries, because there's a Wendell method. There's all these other methods of powerlifting that I was going through at the time. This was back in 2013 or 14. And, I never had 500 pounds on my back before. My good a good squat for me when I'm, competing. Training as a bodybuilder has always been around 315, 365 on a good day, a couple of reps with 405. So I never understood how to get to 500 pounds. And when you're training with a 3-2-1 rep range, and some days 5 rep ranges and, speed work. One day I go into the gym and I'm literally having a hard time doing a 5-pound dumbbell press over my head. And I'm like, I can't even get this over my head. How am I going to do this? And I just applied. I literally picked up a 1-pound dumbbell and I said, okay, well, I could do 5 reps with this. And I stuck with the 5. And when that 1-pound dumbbell, when I knew I can get to 10 reps, I then tried the 5-pound dumbbell and I would do 5 reps. And, I stuck in that. I didn't do exactly a powerlifting routine, but it gave me the backbone, the basis of how to come back with low reps and with that workload to I remember one time I think I did flat dumbbell bench presses with 15 pounds, and I was sitting on the couch and it felt like a Mack truck ran me over. It felt like I took 90s and I was training with them when I only had a couple of pounds in my hand. So it's a humbling experience when you have to start from ground zero again, when you know what you could do, when now you can't do it anymore. It was depressing, to say the least. But I got through it.
So with that, I think there's a lot of inspiration of what you're doing, and competing and still training at a very high level in your 50s. And I think that's should be a lot of motivation for guys who are kind of, I always joke they're the kind of the Al Bundys of the world that they talk about how they scored 4 touchdowns in the state championship 30 years ago, but now their excuse is, well, that's back in the day. I can't do that anymore. When, you kind of calling bullshit on that. And I've followed, obviously being a good friend, followed your career a long time, and you look better now than as any time I remember. And so what kind of helps, other than obviously the competitiveness of this sport, what kind of motivates you on a dreary Monday morning to keep training, to keep doing this?
So let's go back a little bit. So in 2017, I did my first show, comeback. It was the Masters Baltimore Pro, and I took dead last. And then I did the show again in 2018, and I took dead last. And I don't know. I was like, what do I do? I mean, I can't figure this out. And I got home that night, sitting on a couch watching, I think it was the New England Patriots were playing the Giants, I think. But it was the New England Patriots, and they did a little clip on Tom Brady. And he was talking about how much he applies to the off season and what encompasses that. And he was talking about deep tissue massage, stretching, yoga, all of the things that he does, right? So I'm like, well, maybe he's, if he does it and he's got a coach, maybe I should get a coach. Maybe I should go down another path. Maybe I should be in shape, being in better shape in the off season. And let's see if I can get this thing going. So I contacted one coach and there's 3 coaches I'm going to talk about. All 3 are famous in the bodybuilding world. And one told me that he believes my better days are behind me and I shouldn't embarrass myself. Stop. And that pissed me off. Second guy told me he didn't want to work with me because if I failed again, it would just tarnish his name. And he didn't believe that I would put the effort into it. So more of a chip on my shoulder. Third guy told me he was retiring because he didn't have the balls to tell me he didn't want to work with me. He just told me he was retiring. He's not retired. And I had a big chip on my shoulder. So with that, there was something else that I had to overcome that you and I probably have never discussed. And I'll tell you here, is that I would sabotage myself throughout my entire career, which is all going to tie in. And I was like, how do I overcome this? How do I beat that mind set because throughout my whole entire childhood, my mother would tell me other people had that success, you don't. So I'd have success, like I would, you know, come in second place in Team USA or win the team jersey, and she would say, "Well, that's fine, but you're not going to go any further." And then I'd win the USA, and she'd say, you know, something negative, and so that messes with a young mind. And so as of now I'm getting older, I'm finding I'm winning shows, and then for 2-3 years in a row I'm bombing out. Well, I didn't want to do that anymore. So I sat down, I thought about it. You know, I talked to Sheila, we sat down, and we said, I want to do this differently. I have to overcome my how I sabotage myself. I have to stop that. 2, I got to figure this thing out, and I got to overcome everything. So I had a lot on my plate as far as like a mind fuck goes. And I just wanted to make sure that I'm going to give this 100%, but at the same time, I have to battle the demons that are in my head to quit or to think it's too hard or too tough. Other people deserved it, I didn't. And those were the things that I thought about. So I overcame a lot in the last couple of years in learning how to train again, learning how to win and being good with winning and not sabotaging myself. So I applied the training in the off season to where I focused on what I could do, but not what I couldn't do. So in the beginning, I couldn't do any fly movements. I couldn't do anything like that. Oddly enough, I could do pressing movements, but I couldn't do any fly movements. So I just focused on that. I focused on getting stretched. I focused on getting massages. I focused on having a better mindset every day where I thought only positive thoughts. I wanted to change who I was as a person. Also, I just felt like it was time to like how can I put this without sounding, it was time to grow up in a sense. Like, okay, I had this great career, and now I'm having a second chance at this. It's different. I don't have the access like I used to, where I can't go and get into the magazines because social media has overrode that. I don't know that world anymore. How do I do this? And I thought, you know what? I don't care about any of that stuff. I just want to win some shows and close the door. So at first I was thinking, if I could just win one Masters Pro show or just look really good, whether it's win or lose, the next day have a good attitude and a good mindset. And then I could do just one more 212 show, and then I would be done. And really, that's really, really what I wanted, right? And then all of a sudden, now I look back, I'm like, I have, I went to the Masters Pittsburgh Pro in 19, and I won the 50 and 40. Then the next weekend or 2 weeks later, I went to the Hurricane, and I won the 50 and took third in the 40. And then the pandemic happened, and that was kind of like a cool thing for me personally, because having the pandemic gave me that time frame to put more muscle back on. And then I thought, okay, I'll do one more contest. I didn't want to end it that way. I want to do one more show. And then I started talking about, hey, Vin, the Masters Olympia might be coming back. I'm like, well, that'd be nice. They always talk about stuff like that. But now it is. And I look back, and now I have in total 8 wins, where if you add them all up, like at the Baltimore, I won the 50, the 40, and the 35. And in Daytona, I won the 50, and I took second in the 40. So I got a lot of wins, and I've overcome a lot of personal stuff. And I think it's the mindset of accepting a loss in a good way and being humble when you win. And it's something about, my experience now, and just putting all the pieces together to make that puzzle whole. And, we're not going to know who's going to be invited to the Masters Olympia until April 24th, which is crazy. I'm really impatient, and I'm sure other guys are too. We have to wait until April to hear who's invited. But right now, my mindset is I'm training like I'm going into the contest. And if on April 25th, if the news is bad, then there's the Masters World in Pittsburgh on September 3rd. So that's plan B. I don't like having a plan B, but that's right now I have no choice in how I'm going to look at the mindset going into the shows. Because if I'm not invited, okay, sometimes you're invited to the party and sometimes you're not. And that's the way life is. And you have to accept those things.
Well, there's a ton of inspiration, in everything you just said for the athletes out there, for the guys who think that their best days are behind them. I think there's a lot in there, and then there's also a lot for the, going back to that person that, hey, I just want to look good in the mirror. There was a great conversation that Lane Norton had with Andrew Huberman on a podcast, and what they were talking about, a lot of when you're training and you want to transform yourself, you have to be able to kind of kill your old identity. And
right, 100%.
And he says that you can, and this goes back to anybody who's ever been around addiction or alcoholism or anything like that. You have to change your who you are. You can't be the life of the party anymore. You can't go to the same spots anymore. And so the same thing has to apply, that if you have to make some sort of dramatic change, and you have to be internally say, I have to kind of kill that old self. And so and he tells a story about the actor from Remember the Titans. If you remember, the very heavy Ethan Duplessis, I think was his name, the really heavy set guy from Remember the Titans, who lost a ton of weight. And he says
transformation.
Yeah. And every day, he says, every day I have to wake up and kill that demon. I have to kill my former self to stay the new self. And so for the people out there that are looking to just kind of transform, that's a big piece of that you have to let go of all that baggage and accept success. Right. So
yeah,
I think that's important.
And the other thing,
go ahead.
The other thing too is, when I talk or hear, when I'm putting a picture up on Facebook or Instagram, and I get a lot of people who haven't accomplished a lot and they're older, will like send me DMs and saying, you should be more positive. Age is just a number. I'm like, I am being positive, and age is not just a number, because if it were, then I could do what I did when I was 25. And I try to drive it home. It can be done. It has to be done with patience, and it has to be done with focusing on, and I keep driving this home, focus on what you can do, not what you can't do. And I think that has been probably my number one driving force in my success, is I smother what I can do and I ignore what I can't do. There's things that I have difficult time doing. Like, say, if I go into the gym and I have, okay, I want to do A, B, and C for legs, and I'm 20 minutes into trying to warm up, and I'm like, this isn't working today. I gotta change this whole thing. I gotta change the whole plan. Then you change, and you don't. It would be not in my best interest to focus and try to like break through that barrier, because you turned me on to David Goggins.
Yeah.
Right. And so he's a maniac, and if you listen to him, it's like, don't think that way and trudge through it and break that barrier. But when we're lifting weights and we're trying to force our muscles to do something at a later age, we need to be smart about it and say, okay, this isn't going to work today. We need to have another plan of action. Let's pick another exercise. Let's pick another path today, because that's part of my longevity these past 40 years, but in the last 5 years, being able to rebuild my physique and moving forward. Look, my physique's not the way it used to be. I'm older. I still have a small waist, but because I'm 55, naturally my waist is a little bit different, a little bit more thicker. My lats needed to come up. My legs needed to have a more flare to them. And I'm scratching my head thinking, how am I going to do this? And I remember I lost my mobility when I came back, because I couldn't get my hands behind a bar to do any squats. And every time I had my hands up, I would throw myself forward and I couldn't squat. So that's how I stumbled onto Bulgarian split squats. Evan Centopani, who's a former IFBB competitor, he had torn his quad, and I was reading an article that he couldn't squat, but he was able to do Bulgarian split squats. And I used to think Bulgarian split squats, that's the girls' exercise. They do that in the corner, and they look all pretty doing it. But when you work your way up to like 70-pound dumbbells, that exercise is a bitch, and it takes you to another level of intensity where the age is a factor, but you can get there. You can get that intensity up, but you just have to be really mindful of, okay, it's a teetering thing where I don't want to have an injury, and I want to have progress. And then the other thing is, I look at the clock. I give myself I have certain warm-ups for certain body parts, and then that's when my workout starts. So I give it anywhere between 10 and 20 minutes of warming up, and then I look at the clock and I go, I got 1 hour of training. So I'm in the gym about an hour and a half total, and that's including 20 minutes of cardio. It gets a little longer as the show gets closer, but that's about the gist of my workout.
Got it. And so I think that going back to the Goggins thing is that what you have to understand is that changing the path isn't necessarily turning around and going home, right? Changing the path is just picking a smarter way to get to the same place. So right. I think that's a big message that, it's not that you're not training, you're just figuring out a different way to get it. And you're still training very hard, just training smarter.
Well, people like us understand that, but then there's people who want to be like us, and they hear Goggins' message and they get confused. That's what I was trying to say. So if I become more, that's what I meant.
No, 100%. And so that's a huge point to clarify. So as we're getting towards the end here, talk about kind of what you're doing now with your, with coaching competitors, including one in my house. And then you got yourself a new podcast coming up. So talk about some of the new projects you're working on.
Yeah. So, Masters Muscle podcast is going to start this Wednesday. It's going to be live. I'll have a link on my Instagram. My Instagram is Vinny Galanti _ on Instagram. And I'm a Vinny Galanti on Facebook. And, I'm a personal trainer at Powerhouse in Saddlebrook. I have clients that range from that have MS to Parkinson's to up-and-coming bodybuilders to everyday businessmen who just want to look good for the beach. And, I'm just trying to do my thing, enjoy life, be a bodybuilder one more time, and sail into the sunset after this is all over. Hopefully I get invited to the Masters Olympia, and life is good. And I'm enjoying it really, probably more than I've ever enjoyed it, even more so than the days that I was on magazine covers and having features, and when we go out to California and do photo shoots and travel. I've been fortunate and blessed to travel around the world. And I'm going to have that opportunity again if I get invited to the Masters Olympia, where it's going to be held in Romania. And that's going to be exciting. And, just trying to do my thing. And when I'm 65, I want to be sitting on a couch thinking and saying, I did it. I put it to bed. It's all good now.
Awesome. Well, very cool stuff. We'll post all those links. And, in terms of reiterating what you're saying, in terms of being blessed, it's been a blessing to have you a friend for all these years. And as from early on in those days when we were absolutely in awe of you, following you around the gym, to now having it go full circle, having you, train my son, and just been a very cool ride along the way. Can't wait to see what you got next. So we want to thank everybody for listening. This has been the Principles of Performance podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Principles of Performance podcast. If you've enjoyed our content, please like and share on your social media outlets, as well as subscribe and give us a review on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or whatever your preferred platform is to listen to. For more information on the Principles of Program Design courses and workshops, visit us at www.principlesofprogramdesign.com and follow us on all of the social media channels where we post new content every day. To save 10% on any PPD courses, enter the discount code PRINCIPLESPODCAST10 at checkout. If you have any questions we can answer or suggestions for the show, you can email us at info@principlesofprogramdesign.com or message us on social media. Thank you again for your support.